As Officer Jack Carter settled into his favorite corner booth in the small cafe that evening, he wanted a quiet beer before heading home to celebrate his wedding anniversary. That was when he noticed an elderly woman in a faded hospital gown, clearly needing medical attention. Jack told himself this wasn't his responsibility. He was off duty. But when she entered the cafe and walked directly toward him, the words she whispered made his blood run cold. After hearing her and discovering the truth, Jack faced a dark situation that forced him to call for backup. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our future stories. Jack Carter, a veteran police officer, sank into his seat at the corner booth of the small cafe he had frequented for years. The cafe was tucked away among the old buildings in the neighborhood. Every evening, he stopped by to escape the stress of work, savoring a hot coffee or sometimes a cold beer. But tonight was different. It was the 10th anniversary of his marriage to Sarah. In his mind, he pictured his wife at home, preparing an anniversary dinner. Sarah cherished every moment they spent together, even though Jack often came home late due to work. As he sat down, he felt his muscles gradually relaxing after a long day. The worn leather chairs and cozy atmosphere of the cafe had become a familiar comfort, like a second home, offering Jack a sense of peace. He ordered a cold beer, reminding himself he'd only stay a moment to unwind before heading home to Sarah. His phone buzzed with a message from her. "Don't forget dinner at 8. Love you." Jack smiled, quickly replying, "I'll be home soon. Love you too." When his beer arrived, Jack took a sip, savoring the cool taste that seemed to soothe every fiber of his being. He told himself he'd only be here a short while, just enough to relax and mentally prepare for a perfect evening with his wife. Everything seemed to be going perfectly until Jack suddenly noticed an unusual figure outside the cafe's dusty window. Standing on the uneven sidewalk was an elderly woman with a frail and lost appearance. Jack glimpsed her hospital gown, faded from many washes, its original color indiscernible. Her body was so thin that she seemed almost skeletal, and the wind seemed to sway her. Her sparse white hair fluttered in the cold breeze, and her face showed signs of exhaustion and sorrow. Her faded eyes seemed to be searching for something, though she didn't appear fully aware of her surroundings. A part of Jack felt he should help her, but he tried to ignore the impulse, reasoning it wasn't his responsibility. He was off duty and had a valid reason to take a break, to prioritize himself and his family. Countless times he'd reminded himself to put family first, and to avoid letting work consume his entire life. But as the elderly woman drew closer and entered the cafe, Jack's instincts stirred, his senses snapping back to full alert. The scene had become impossible to ignore. The woman paused momentarily upon entering as if searching for something. Her gaze drifted over each table and face until it settled on Jack. Without a word, she slowly made her way toward him, her frail legs trembling as though they could give out at any moment. The cafe's warm light highlighted her fragility, making her appear surreal and out of place, as if she didn't quite belong to this world. As she approached, Jack felt a mixture of concern and curiosity well up within him. He watched her closely, trying to guess what she needed. Then she leaned down, whispering into his ear. Her voice was hoarse, broken, almost like the wind murmuring, but it carried an unsettling urgency. She spoke disjointed, cryptic words, each one feeling like a warning he couldn't yet comprehend. Jack sat motionless for a moment after the elderly woman whispered those strange words into his ear. Her words lingered in his mind, hazy and cryptic, like a puzzle he couldn't immediately solve. He tried to dismiss it, reminding himself that it wasn't his business. He was off duty, and tonight was supposed to be reserved for his anniversary with Sarah. This time was meant solely for her, and Jack knew how much she hoped he'd step back from work and spend more time with family. But something in the elderly woman's eyes made it impossible for Jack to just ignore her. Her cloudy eyes held a distant sorrow, a hidden fear, as if she were lost in a world far removed from his own. Her entire body trembled, her frail hand clutching the edge of the table. For just a moment, her eyes seemed to plead with him in a way he couldn't disregard. "She's just an old lady," he told himself, trying to convince himself she'd be fine and that someone else would likely step in to help. He needed to let it go and focus on his anniversary with his wife. His hand held the beer glass, but he couldn't bring himself to lift it, as if something held him back. Jack felt the tension mounting inside him, torn between his professional duty and his desire to have a peaceful evening with Sarah. He had once promised Sarah he'd do his best not to let work consume their lives. Every time he came home, he tried to leave behind the stresses of being a police officer, but this wasn't the first time he found himself caught in a dilemma outside his working hours. His mind urged him not to get involved, but a part of him, the instinctual part with the responsibility of a protector, couldn't ignore this frail woman's helplessness. Jack decided he'd take her to the police station or call for assistance. But just as he extended his hand, she suddenly shivered, gasped for breath, and hurriedly turned to leave the cafe. Jack watched her retreating figure, hesitating about whether he should pursue it. He had planned to return to Sarah right after handling this, but something in the woman's frightened eyes held him in place, making it impossible to simply turn away. Outside, the sky darkened, and the dim streetlights cast an eerie, peaceful chill over the surroundings. Then, a faint sound outside startled him, a small noise that nonetheless stirred a deep unease within. He glanced out the window to see the elderly woman had collapsed on the sidewalk, her frail legs unable to support her any longer. The sight made Jack's heart clench. Maybe someone else will help her, he told himself, trying to convince himself not to intervene, that an off-duty cop didn't need to jump into every situation. But his feet seemed to have a mind of their own. Step by step, he rose from his seat, feeling the weight of inner conflict bearing down on him, between his professional duty and the desire to preserve a few moments of personal time. As Jack stepped outside, he saw a small crowd gathering around the elderly woman. From a distance, he spotted the flashing red and blue lights of an approaching ambulance, ready to provide her the care she needed. He sighed with relief, thinking she would soon be taken care of and that he could return to his peaceful evening. But just as he was about to head back into the cafe, a strange sight caught his eye through the cafe's glass window, making him freeze. In the cafe's dim light, the elderly woman appeared again, standing quietly near the entrance, her gaze fixed intently on him. Jack couldn't believe his eyes. It was as if she hadn't been taken away by the ambulance crew at all. Step by step, she moved closer into the cafe, her gait slow and unsteady, her face marked with exhaustion and a haunting fear. A chill ran down Jack's spine, as though a cold wind had swept through, prompting him to blink and look again to ensure he wasn't seeing things. He slowed his steps, trying to remain calm, but her gaze rooted him in place. Her eyes were vacant, staring directly at him with a silent, desperate plea. Unease swelled within him as she drew nearer, nearly collapsing beside the table where he'd been sitting. Despite reminding himself that this wasn't his responsibility, his instincts as a police officer urged him to take action. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Jack asked, his voice steady yet gentle, attempting to calm her without adding to her distress. She looked at him with a lost expression, her dry lips barely moving as she murmured a chilling phrase, "Too late. It's too late." A shiver ran down Jack's spine. Her cryptic words left him with an undeniable sense that something dark was hidden behind them. Her eyes, sunken and weary, conveyed an immense despair. In that fleeting moment, he understood that she needed help, that perhaps what he'd seen outside was only the surface of a much deeper, more complex problem. He glanced around. The crowd and medical staff were still busy outside, apparently unaware that she'd returned to the cafe. Jack felt an intense urge to get to the bottom of this situation, even though he knew it could lead him into unexpected trouble. She stepped closer, her voice weak and broken. "Please, help me." Jack felt a mix of anxiety and compassion. He sensed her fragility, not only in her frail frame and unsteady steps, but in the unspoken pain and fear in her eyes. It was as if she wanted to say something yet couldn't find the words, as though a weight was pressing on her soul. "Ma'am, please have a seat here for a moment. I'll help you," Jack said, trying to sound comforting and gentle. He offered her a seat next to him, watching her every expression. Though he didn't yet understand what was happening, he knew he couldn't leave her, couldn't brush off her fearful whispers as mere delirium. She sat down, her hands clasped tightly together, her face growing more anxious and distraught. "My son, they couldn't save him," she whispered, each word a small piece of a story shrouded in mystery that Jack couldn't yet fully comprehend. He leaned closer, resting a hand on her shoulder, looking into her eyes with genuine concern. "Can you tell me more?" Jack asked, his voice calm. "Whatever it is, I'll do my best to help you." In the cafe's soft, warm light, Jack could see the elderly woman struggling to gather the courage to speak, each word seeming to require tremendous effort. He sensed that by staying to help her, he was opening a door to a dark and complex secret, one far beyond anything he'd imagined when he first sat down at the cafe. Jack sat across from the elderly woman, Mary, in the warm yet somber light of the cafe. Her words echoed in his mind, each fragment like a piece of an unsolved puzzle. Slowly, almost in a whisper, she introduced herself. "My name is Mary Shelley." Her gaze didn't meet his directly. Instead, she seemed to look through him into a distant space filled with mystery and sorrow. "It's too late. It's too late," Mary murmured, her voice distant but heavy, filling Jack with an uneasy feeling. He couldn't help but wonder what she was referring to. Was it a tragic past event, or a long-buried family secret? He looked at her with compassion and, at the same time, a curiosity that he couldn't suppress. "Mary, did something happen? You can tell me. I'll try to help you," Jack said softly, hoping she would open up. Mary's gaze shifted to him, filled with a silent, unspoken pain. "Robert. He once promised everything would be all right, but in the end," she sighed, hesitating as if searching for the right words to convey what she had endured. "You know, there were things Robert hid, things he kept from us, thinking it would protect the family. But no one can escape the truth forever." "Robert was your husband, wasn't he?" Jack asked gently, trying to encourage her to share more. Mary nodded slowly, her cloudy eyes shimmering as she spoke of her late husband. Yes, Robert was my husband. He was a good man, but he kept secrets to protect us. Perhaps it was those secrets that ultimately hurt him." She paused, her frail fingers trembling as she clasped them tightly, as though holding on to painful memories she couldn't let go of. "What happened to Robert, Mary?" Jack asked, keeping his voice soft and steady, not wanting to frighten her. He sensed that this story went far beyond a simple loss or grief. There was something far more troubling buried within it. Mary took a deep breath, her eyes glinting with reflections of the past. "Robert, he always did his best for the family, especially for our son, Stephen. But Stephen, he strayed from us a long time ago, down a path we couldn't prevent him from taking." She closed her eyes, her face contorting as she relived an intense, painful memory. Jack listened silently, understanding that this family had been through profound loss. Mary's story wasn't just about the passing of her husband, but about the shattering of a once happy family. He felt a deep empathy and also a growing curiosity, as if the fragments Mary was sharing held a painful, hidden truth. Mary opened her eyes, gazing directly at Jack. "Robert sacrificed everything for the family, but in the end, I still couldn't hold it together. He once said he'd protect us, that he wouldn't let Stephen fall into a life of ruin. But some things even love can't save," she said, her voice tinged with sorrowful acceptance. A chill ran down Jack's spine. Mary's words weren't accusations, but rather a painful acceptance of a mother and wife who had watched helplessly as her loved one slipped away. The guilt and burden in her voice prompted Jack to question just what this family had endured. "Mary, can you tell me more?" "I want to help you," Jack said, his tone warm and resolute. Mary blinked, seemingly weighing something in her mind, then sighed, her words filled with anguish. "Sometimes we think we can protect others by hiding secrets, by keeping things buried in darkness. But that darkness eventually consumes everything. Robert thought he could manage it, that he could save Stephen, but in the end, it only brought suffering to us all." As Jack listened, a powerful need to uncover the truth stirred within him. Although he was just a police officer, he knew he couldn't remain an outsider in this situation. The secrets surrounding Mary's family seemed to conceal a tragic mystery, and he felt that solving it might bring her the peace she desperately needed. "Mary, I'll help you," Jack said, his voice filled with determination. "You don't have to face this alone. I'll be here to listen and to help you through this." Mary looked at him, her eyes red and weary, but there was a faint glimmer of hope within them. She nodded slowly, as if she'd finally found someone she could trust to share the burden she had carried alone for so many years. Jack quietly followed Mary as she left the cafe, her frail figure swaying, each step weighed down by an invisible burden. The street ahead grew darker, leading into an area he knew well, a neighborhood teeming with the homeless, struggling souls, and abandoned buildings. It was an unstable area where signs of crime were not uncommon, cloaked in shadows, hushed murmurs, and watchful eyes peering from hidden corners. As they ventured deeper into the district, Jack took out his phone and sent a quick message to his wife, Grace. "I'll be late, handling an urgent situation. Don't worry. Love you." Though the message was sent, a lingering sense of unease remained heavy in his chest. He pocketed his phone and refocused on Mary's fragile silhouette, now just a faint outline ahead, slowly moving down the cracked street. The buildings they passed bore the marks of neglect and time. Windows shattered, walls covered in graffiti, and trash scattered across every corner. Jack noticed a few figures lurking in the shadows, their eyes wary and suspicious as they assessed the stranger encroaching on their turf. Despite being unarmed and without backup, Jack was determined to protect Mary, no matter what awaited them. Mary continued further until she stopped in front of an old, decrepit house that appeared abandoned for years. The house stood out amid the surrounding decay, overgrown weeds, a blocked entrance covered in decaying wood, and dimly lit windows clouded with dust. The door hung ajar, tilting slightly and cracked with a faint yellow light seeping from inside, casting an eerie glow as if concealing a dark secret. Jack stayed a few steps behind, observing cautiously. Mary hesitated at the door, her hands trembling, her face etched with conflict. From a distance, she looked like someone drawn to this strange place against her will, unable to leave despite sensing the danger within. "Mary, is this where you wanted to go?" Jack's voice broke the silence, cutting through the tension that hung thick in the air. She turned to look at him, her expression a mix of surprise and relief, as if grateful for his presence. "Yes, this was our home," she whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow and exhaustion. Jack glanced around, noticing the curious eyes watching from afar. This place was unsafe, and he couldn't leave Mary to face whatever was inside this crumbling house alone. Stepping closer, he tried to offer her a sense of safety, even as his unease mounted. "Don't worry, I'm here with you," Jack reassured her, his voice gentle yet firm. Mary nodded, her hand shaken as she reached for the old doorknob. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a shadowy interior. Jack followed her inside, his gaze sweeping over the room to assess the situation. The dim glow of a hanging light cast flickering shadows on the walls, heightening the eerie atmosphere. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, and the room was littered with old, broken furniture. In one corner, a wooden table lay overturned, with empty bottles and crumpled papers scattered on the floor. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the far end of the room, causing Jack to stop in his tracks. It was a young man, gaunt, with sunken eyes, his frame trembling as if gripped by addiction. The young man's gaze fixed on Mary, his expression shifting from shock to anger as he stepped closer. Jack sensed the animosity in his stare and braced himself. "What are you doing here?" The young man's voice trembled with anger and resentment, his bloodshot eyes glaring at Mary. Jack felt the tension spike as he moved subtly to place himself between Mary and the man. Mary took a step back, her lips quivering, tears forming in her eyes as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Jack remained calm but on high alert, ready for anything. "Who are you? What's going on here?" Jack asked, his tone calm yet authoritative, hoping to de-escalate the situation. The young man ignored Jack, his focus locked on Mary as he spat out his accusations, his voice laced with bitterness. "You're the one who ruined everything. You killed my father." His words hung heavy in the dim, oppressive air, making Jack feel as though the room itself was closing in. Mary flinched, her eyes wide, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks as she stammered, struggling to defend herself. "No, it wasn't like that. I was trying to save you, to keep you from this path." Her voice was faint, each word soaked in pain and regret. Jack realized this was no ordinary confrontation. This was a tragic family conflict that had festered for years, weighing down both mother and son. He could see the young man's pain and rage, but also Mary's remorse and desperation. It dawned on Jack that he was witnessing a clash between a mother and a lost son, each bearing their burden of grief and misunderstanding. In that brief moment, Jack knew he couldn't abandon Mary to face this family tragedy alone. Despite being unarmed, despite the risks, he couldn't turn away. Standing tall, he positioned himself protectively between her and the young man, ready to defend her. "Listen," Jack began, his voice calm yet resolute. "Whatever happened, we can talk about it calmly." The young man's fiery gaze shifted to Jack, his anger momentarily softened by a hint of hesitation. Jack sensed that despite the volatile tension, patience and compassion might be the only tools he had to diffuse the situation peacefully. As Mary drew closer to Stephen, her tear-filled eyes and trembling voice reached out to him. "Stephen, my love, I just want to talk, to help you." Her voice was laden with desperate pleading, but Stephen's response wasn't one of understanding or tenderness. Instead, he turned sharply, his red-rimmed eyes blazing with pent-up rage, and shoved Mary out of his reach. Her frail frame couldn't withstand the force, and she fell to the floor heavily, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent house. Without hesitation, Jack rushed to help Mary as Stephen retreated further into the house, slamming a door behind him. In that instant, Jack realized this situation was far more complicated and perilous than he'd anticipated. Darkness and an unsettling silence filled the house, broken only by Mary's labored breaths and fragmented memories flooding back into her mind. Robert promised he'd protect us," Mary muttered, her gaze vacant, staring into an unseen void as if disconnected from her surroundings. Jack helped her sit up against the wall, his voice steady and reassuring. "Mary, you'll be all right. I'm here with you." But Mary seemed lost, consumed by scattered memories of her late husband, Robert, and his promises. "He said he'd never let our son fall into the darkness," she choked, her hands trembling as they touched a small object in her pocket, a faded wedding ring with almost illegible engravings. Once a symbol of love and happiness, it now held remnants of a painful past she couldn't let go. Jack looked at her with compassion, seeing the sorrow and loss etched deeply into her face. Her fragmented recollections revealed a family shattered by unfulfilled promises and hidden grief. She wasn't only haunted by Stephen's state, she was mourning a family that had once been whole. A mother who had sacrificed and loved fiercely, yet ultimately watched helplessly as her son drifted into the shadows. As Mary continued to sink into her memories, Jack pulled out his phone and called for backup. "I need immediate assistance at this address. Possible domestic disturbance and psychological crisis. The son may pose a danger," he reported, his tone firm and urgent. His colleagues assured him they would arrive shortly, providing a measure of relief, though Jack knew each passing second could escalate the situation further. Sitting beside Mary, he listened to her murmur fragmented stories of Robert's efforts to save Stephen. "Robert tried so hard, but even he couldn't save him." Her voice trailed off, heavy with anguish and regret, as though she couldn't forgive herself for the family she felt slipping away. Moments later, the sound of police sirens grew closer, and Jack felt a wave of relief knowing help was on the way. Just then, the door inside the house flew open again. Stephen reappeared, his eyes blazing with fury as he caught sight of Jack beside his mother. He advanced, his footsteps heavy and anger barely restrained. "Who do you think you are, meddling in our family business?" Stephen shouted, his voice rough and unstable. Jack rose to his feet, signaling for calm as he spoke evenly. "I'm just here to help Mary. Take a breath, Stephen." But Jack's words did little to quell Stephen's anger. He drew closer, his red-rimmed eyes full of resentment. "You have no idea. She She's the reason my father's gone. She was always pushing him, always controlling. He died because of her." Stephen's accusations filled the tense air, and Jack could feel the profound pain beneath Stephen's outburst, a fury born out of a broken heart. Mary began to sob, her voice trembling and defeated. "No, it's not like that, Stephen. I only wanted to keep our family safe, to keep you safe." Her words seemed only to ignite Stephen's anger further. He surged forward, fists clenched, his intent unmistakable. Jack immediately stepped between them, raising his voice to intervene. "Stop! This isn't the way, Stephen." For a brief moment, Jack saw Stephen's gaze flicker with hesitation as if Jack's words had struck a chord. But his anger remained dominant, overpowering any flicker of peace. He glared at Jack with a look of despair and rage. Just then, the flashing lights of police cars illuminated the room through the grimy windows. The backup had arrived. Realizing he was surrounded, Stephen took a step back, his eyes glistening with a mixture of desperation and bitterness, before he turned and disappeared into the shadows at the rear of the house, evading the incoming officers. Jack returned to Mary's side, his heart heavy as he watched her slumped against the wall, racked with sorrow and remorse. Footsteps echoed as his colleagues entered the house, bringing light and a sense of relief. Jack knew he couldn't undo the past or fully heal Mary's pain, but at least he was there to help her face the lingering shadows of a deeply fractured reality. In the ambulance, Jack sat beside Mary as the vehicle sped through the darkened streets, its lights flashing, illuminating the road ahead. Mary lay on the stretcher, staring blankly at the ceiling, her frail voice muttering disjointed sentences filled with despair. "Robert, he's still out there. I know he's alive, but in pain, I have to end his suffering." Her words were weak but persistent, filling the confined space with an unshakable sorrow. Jack listened intently, sensing the turmoil and profound sorrow in her words. His heart ached, partly out of sympathy and partly because he recognized the hidden tragedy Mary was living through. It seemed she could not accept the reality that Robert was gone. Her aging mind, distorted by illness and grief, only deepened the pain she could not let go. A paramedic nearby leaned in towards Jack, his face somber. "She escaped from the hospital," he explained in a low voice, just loud enough for Jack to hear. "We got a report of her missing since yesterday. She's been receiving treatment for early-stage dementia and heart issues. Her husband, Robert, died in a car accident recently. I suppose the shock pushed her to this state." Jack remained silent, his mind turning over the weight of Mary's family tragedy. The loss, combined with her illness, had left her unable to accept reality, as if she were still living in a time when Robert was by her side, sharing life's burdens. Now, Mary was trapped in a whirlpool of fragmented memories and unending sorrow, unable to recognize that her beloved husband was no longer with her. Once more, Mary murmured, her eyes wide as if seeing something only she could perceive. "I know he's there, waiting for me. Robert would never leave me alone." Her voice cracked and her frail hands clenched tightly, grasping at the last remnants of her past life. Gently, Jack took her hand, speaking softly. "Mary, Robert isn't suffering anymore. He's in a peaceful place now, where no pain can reach him. You did everything you could for him, and he knows that." But Mary seemed not to hear his words of comfort. Her eyes stayed fixed, brimming with tears as she muttered in despair, "I have to help him." to end his suffering. Jack understood that, in Mary's mind, the line between past and present had blurred. Her scattered memories of Robert, the husband who was gone, haunted her, as though he still existed somewhere, waiting for her to relieve him of a pain only she could feel in her confused reality. After several minutes, the ambulance finally reached the hospital. As the doors opened, the medical team swiftly moved Mary into the emergency room, doctors and nurses rushing forward to assess her. Jack followed closely behind, unwilling to leave Mary in her fragile state. He wanted to be sure she received the best care possible, and if he could, he intended to stay until she was settled. As Mary was transferred to a hospital bed, a doctor approached Jack, his eyes reflecting both concern and understanding. "We'll begin examining her condition right away," the doctor assured Jack, nodding reassuringly. "She needs special care to help ease her mental and emotional strain." Jack stepped back, watching Mary lie motionless on the bed, her eyes still staring up into an unknown void. Each time she mentioned Robert, her voice grew frail and desolate, as though he was the last thread connecting her to this world. Jack knew that Mary's life had been utterly dominated by her loss and an overwhelming fixation on her husband's memory. He realized that no matter what anyone did, it would be difficult for her to move beyond this torment. Before the doctor left, Jack stopped him, asking more about Mary's condition. "Is there anything we can do to help her feel more at peace? She seems trapped in the past, unable to let go." The doctor sighed, his expression reflective. "For patients like Mary, emotional support is crucial, but it's never easy. Her dementia, combined with the traumatic loss, has left her stuck at a particular point in her life. The best we can offer is a safe, stable environment where she might find moments of peace." Jack nodded, feeling a slight relief knowing Mary would receive the care she needed. But in his heart, he couldn't shake the memory of her words about ending the suffering. It wasn't just the expression of a person in pain, it felt like a desperate plea. Jack wondered if there might be a way to help Mary truly confront her grief, to allow her a final sense of peace in the life that remained. As Jack stood in the hallway, looking into the room where Mary lay, he sensed the weight of her tragedy, a life lived through unspeakable loss. He understood that, even if she found brief respite in the present moment, Mary's life would always be intertwined with shadows of the past. And for Mary, that was a tragedy that nothing could ever fully erase. As Jack stood quietly in the hospital hallway, a familiar voice sounded from behind. He turned and saw Grace, his wife, hurrying toward him, her face etched with worry. "Jack, are you okay? I got your message and came right away," she said, her eyes filled with concern. Jack nodded, but before he could respond, Grace's gaze drifted toward the room where Mary lay. Her expression shifted to one of shock and deep emotion. "Jack, that woman, I recognize her," Grace whispered, almost unable to believe her own eyes. Jack looked at her, puzzled. "You know her?" Grace nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on Mary. "She was Joe's kindergarten teacher. When he was little, Joe had a lot of difficulties fitting in because of his hyperactivity. I remember how desperate I felt, almost hopeless watching him struggle so much, but Mrs. Mary was the only one who saw something special in him. She believed he had potential, that he just needed patience and the right guidance." Grace's voice softened, filled with emotion as she continued. "She would stay after school, sitting with Joe to help him focus, teaching him how to control his impulses. Mary would even meet with us to suggest ways we could support him at home. She never gave up, even when everyone else thought Joe couldn't keep up with his classmates. Jack felt a surge of gratitude welling up in his heart. He realized that Mary had been more than just a teacher to Joe. She had been the one person who opened doors of hope for him and his family, helping them through one of the hardest chapters in their lives. She hadn't just helped Joe, she had helped them all find strength in a difficult time. This understanding left Jack humbled, knowing Mary's impact on his family had been profound. Grace turned to Jack, her eyes glistening with tears. "Jack, if it weren't for Mary, Joe wouldn't be the confident, resilient boy he is today. She gave us hope and strength when we were close to losing faith." Jack gently placed a hand on Grace's shoulder, feeling the same warmth and gratitude. He had only known Mary as an elderly woman in distress, but now he saw her as someone who had shaped their lives in ways he hadn't even realized. Mary wasn't just someone in need of help. She was a person who had made a lasting difference in their family's journey. Looking back at Mary through the window, Grace's gaze softened with gratitude. "Jack, we'll never be able to repay her. She gave Joe a chance and gave us hope. And now she's here, in this state. If there's anything we can do for her, I know we need to try." Jack held Grace's hand, his resolve strengthening. "You're right, Grace. Mary isn't just someone who needs help. She's part of our family in a way. It's our turn to be there for her, to stand by her and see her through this." Grace smiled faintly, though tears still glistened in her eyes. She looked at Jack with unwavering faith, and Jack knew he wouldn't rest until Mary received the care she deserved. Standing outside her room, he felt an overwhelming warmth, as if the bond between their family and Mary had only grown stronger. Soon after, a doctor approached them, explaining that Mary was stable but would need continued care and rest. Jack and Grace exchanged a look, wordlessly agreeing they would be by her side. Mary's presence was a reminder of kindness and dedication, and now they would do whatever they could to honor her impact on their lives. When Jack stepped into Mary's room, she lay there, eyes distant, gazing up at the ceiling. Seeing Jack and Grace, her gaze softened, as if she recognized something familiar. Perhaps, in the fog of her memory, a fragment of the past had surfaced. Grace walked over, sitting beside Mary's bed. She gently took Mary's frail hand, feeling its fragility. "Mrs. Mary." "It's me, Grace, Joe's mom," she said softly, as if afraid to startle her. "Do you remember Joe? You helped him when he was little and having a hard time." Mary looked at Grace, her expression one of deep concentration. Slowly, as if a long-lost memory resurfaced, she whispered, "Joe, that lively boy?" Her voice held a note of wonder, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Grace smiled, nodding, tears in her eyes. "Yes, our Joe, thanks to you, he grew up stronger. You spent so much time, so much love helping him. We've never forgotten what you did for us." Mary's eyes glistened as she remembered. "Joe, such a sweet child," she murmured, her gaze shifting as if she were looking back into the past. "He needed someone to believe in him. I just wanted to help him smile." Grace held Mary's hand tighter, her voice choked with gratitude. "And you did. You made all the difference, Mrs. Mary. Joe is happy and doing well, all because of what you taught him." Jack stood silently nearby, listening to the deeply emotional reunion between Grace and Mary. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. Mary was not just anyone. She was someone who had made an indelible mark on his family's life. As the doctor gently reminded them to let Mary rest, Jack and Grace stepped out, but not without promising to return. As they walked away from the hospital, sharing a silent understanding, they felt that acts of kindness and gratitude had no boundaries. In the quiet of the night, Jack knew that they had been given a chance to repay a debt of gratitude that would last a lifetime. As they left the hospital room, Mary looked at Jack and Grace with a hopeful gaze. Her voice, though weak, carried a steady resolve as she said, "Jack, Grace, I want to see Robert. One last time. I need to say goodbye to him." Jack and Grace exchanged a knowing look, understanding this might be Mary's final opportunity to find peace with her loss. They nodded in agreement, respecting her last wish. The medical staff arranged for Mary to be taken to the hospital morgue. She was wheeled down cold, sterile corridors, the bright fluorescent lights casting a somber atmosphere along the way. Grace gently placed her hand on Mary's shoulder, offering warmth and comfort, while Jack walked beside her, his eyes filled with empathy and steadfastness. Upon reaching the morgue's door, the staff opened it, leading them into the quiet, chilly space. Inside lay rows of still beds, draped in white sheets that evoked a solemn sense of eternal rest. Jack and Grace stepped back, allowing Mary a moment of privacy for this final farewell. As she looked upon Robert's covered form, Mary felt her heart pounding with both trepidation and a deep yearning for closure. With trembling hands, Mary carefully pulled back the sheet, revealing Robert's face. His expression was serene, free from the lines of pain and worry that had once etched so deeply. She gazed at his closed eyes and the familiar features of the man she had loved, a man with whom she had shared countless joyful days. "Robert," Mary whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you. I let you bear too much." Memories flooded her mind like an old film reel of precious moments. She recalled peaceful afternoons when they strolled hand in hand through their garden, where roses and jasmine bloomed, filling the air with fragrance. It was in that garden that they had sat on an old wooden bench beneath the ancient tree's shade, sharing dreams for their son, Stephen. Robert had once told her he hoped Stephen would find happiness and carve his path, free from the hardships they had endured. Closing her eyes, Mary felt as if Robert's warmth still lingered beside her, as though he hadn't truly left. She imagined his soft, familiar voice whispering, "Mary, you did everything you could. You were my anchor, our family's rock. Don't hold on to guilt. Let me rest in peace." Mary opened her eyes to the stillness, wondering if she had heard his voice or if it was just a figment of her grieving heart. Yet, even if only a fleeting feeling, it brought her peace. She felt as if Robert was telling her that the pain had ended, that she could let him rest without worry. Grace stepped closer, placing her hand gently on Mary's shoulder, her gaze kind and understanding. Mary nodded slowly, her eyes no longer filled with anxiety but instead with acceptance. She whispered a final goodbye. "Rest in peace, Robert. I'll keep living. For you, for Stephen. I won't let you worry any more." A staff member softly drew the sheet over Robert's face once more, sealing his image in Mary's memory forever. Jack and Grace helped Mary out of the morgue, leaving the silence and eternity behind them. On the way back to her hospital room, Mary sat quietly in her wheelchair, her gaze lowered but her expression changed. Peace now resided in her eyes, as if she had finally released the burdens of the past. When they returned to her room, Mary gently spoke to Jack and Grace. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance. Because of you, I was able to say my final goodbye to Robert and find a bit of peace." Jack and Grace smiled warmly. There, eyes filled with love and gratitude. They knew that in that brief but precious moment, they had helped Mary find tranquility in her heart. Jack looked at her, his heart swelling with respect and admiration. Mary's life had been a long journey marked with trials, but at last she had found a moment of peace in her final hours. Jack silently vowed that whatever might come, he would be there for Mary, caring for her and ensuring her comfort. In doing so, he and Grace would repay, in some small way, the support and hope Mary had once given their son. After bringing Mary back to her hospital room, Jack and Grace lingered, staying close to her, hoping to offer some comfort in her solitude, but as Mary opened up, the story of her family grew clearer, painting a tragic picture that weighed heavily on Jack's heart. In the stillness of the evening, Mary began to share stories about the days when her family had been happy, and about her son, Stephen, once a joyful boy who had since descended into the darkness of addiction and despair. Mary described how she and her husband, Robert, had dedicated themselves to raising Stephen in a loving, nurturing environment. They'd taken him on outdoor adventures and taught him kindness and the importance of family values. But everything changed when Stephen entered his teenage years. He grew distant, spending time with people Mary felt uneasy about. Though she and Robert tried everything to keep him close, Stephen's rebellion soon spiraled beyond their control. "We tried everything," Mary whispered, her voice wavering with emotion. "Robert and I sought counseling, brought him to therapists, and even considered rehabilitation programs, but nothing worked." Robert had held on to hope, believing that with love and patience they could save their son. He'd once taken a leave from work to spend more time with Stephen. They'd gone fishing and hiking, and engaged in all the activities Robert thought would rekindle their bond. But Stephen remained ensnared in addiction, growing more detached, sinking further into a dark, isolating world. Eventually, he disappeared into the shadowed parts of the city, reappearing only when his health failed, his mind clouded by confusion. Each time he returned, Mary barely recognized the boy she had once known as lively and full of light. Jack listened closely, feeling the weight of the pain and helplessness Mary and Robert had endured. He remembered the times he'd seen Stephen with bloodshot eyes, his behavior erratic. Now, Jack understood that Stephen's struggles went far beyond substance abuse. They were the scars of a wounded soul searching for escape. "We lost Stephen long before Robert passed," Mary murmured, her voice breaking. "Robert always told me we couldn't give up hope, that we had to hold on to the thought of saving Stephen. But I could see it breaking him. He couldn't bear the sight of his son drowning in darkness and knowing he was powerless to pull him out." In a final act of desperation, Robert had tried enrolling Stephen in an intensive, expensive rehab program, convinced it was their last chance. But Stephen ran away, unable to accept the constraints. He cut himself off from the family, only reappearing when he was too weak or lost to continue. Mary watched her son return to her in fleeting moments, each time more broken, feeling as though her own heart fractured anew. Grace gently placed a comforting hand over Mary's, her expression soft with empathy. "Mary, you and Robert did everything you could," she said soothingly. "Stephen knows you both loved him deeply. Sometimes life takes us down paths we can't control." Mary gave a faint nod, her gaze distant. "Perhaps you're right, Grace, but a mother's heart will always long to see her child happy and well. Stephen was everything to me, and now I just don't know if I'll ever see him find his way back." Jack placed a reassuring hand on Mary's shoulder, offering her a warm, steadfast look. "Mary, you're not alone in this. We'll be here to support you and help Stephen. You've done all you can, and now we'll continue fighting for him with you. Trust that we'll do everything we can." Mary looked at Jack, a faint, weary smile crossing her face. It was perhaps the first time in years that she felt a glimmer of hope, however fragile. Knowing there were people still willing to help brought a sense of relief, as though the immense burden she had carried was finally beginning to lift. As Jack and Grace stood to leave, Mary remained seated, her eyes glistening with hidden emotions but carrying a spark of hope. She understood that Stephen's life was teetering on the edge and that her love alone couldn't save him. But now, with Jack and Grace's support, she dared to wish for a miracle, that Stephen might find his way back, rediscover himself, and break free from the shadows that surrounded him. That night, as Jack and Grace left the hospital, they couldn't shake the image of Mary, an enduring mother, bearing the weight of loss, yet holding on to her love for her son with fierce resilience. They knew this would be no easy journey, and a perfect ending was unlikely. But they were determined not to let Mary face this tragedy alone. Deep down, Jack and Grace made a silent promise to do whatever they could to help this family find a sliver of peace, however faint, in the darkness that had consumed them. After days at the hospital, Mary's health had stabilized. Though everyone knew she needed long-term care, a place where a dedicated team could tend to her heart condition and her fading memory. Grace gently suggested, "Mary, a care home can provide you with the best support. There, you'll find peace and rest." Mary paused, her eyes distant, processing the idea. She understood it was the right decision, yet the thought of leaving the house where she and Robert had shared a life, a space filled with the memories of their family, tugged at her heart. "Grace," Mary whispered, her voice tinged with sorrow, "before I go, I'd like to visit my home one last time. I want to see it, touch the things that meant so much to our family, as if Robert and I were still there together." Jack and Grace exchanged a look of understanding, and Jack gently placed a hand on Mary's shoulder. "We'll make it happen, Mary. We'll take you back one last time, and whenever you're ready, we'll be right here." Mary nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips as she felt a warmth she had thought lost forever. The next day they took Mary back to her home, the house she and Robert had built together and where they had raised Stephen. As they pulled up, Mary's heart swelled. The house looked the same but felt filled with quiet solitude, as though it, too, had mourned along with her. Entering the house, Mary moved slowly with reverence. Each room held memories. The family photo on the table, Robert's favorite armchair, worn from the evenings he would sit there reading. She stopped by a glass cabinet in the living room where cherished mementos lay. Mary picked up an old necklace, a gift from Robert on their first anniversary, tracing its worn details. Beside it was a photo of Stephen as a young boy, his face beaming with innocence and his eyes full of hope. Mary's fingers lingered over the image, waves of longing washing over her. These keepsakes represented the deep love and bond that, despite everything, still connected her to her family. Grace moved beside her, gently taking Mary's hand. "These memories and all the love are always with you, Mary. This house will forever be a part of you, no matter where you go." Mary nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She turned to Jack and Grace, her voice trembling with gratitude. "Thank you both for standing by me. Without you, I don't think I could have faced any of this." Jack squeezed her shoulder, promising, "Mary, we'll always be here for you. The care home is just a new place to live, but we'll be your family wherever you are." Mary smiled, her heart touched. She knew that true connection was never lost, no matter the changes. She spent a few more quiet moments in the house, silently bidding farewell to every corner and cherished memory. As Jack and Grace carried Mary out of the house for the last time, she looked back once more, deeply feeling the memories that remained in the house. She knew that her new life would not be easy, but she found comfort in her new friends who had been there for her in her most difficult moments. She whispered to herself, as a promise to Robert and herself, that she would live on, finding some peace in the days that remained. Jack and Grace stood beside her, once again affirming that they would always be there, no matter where she was or what happened. On the drive to the care home, Mary gazed out at the trees lining the road, their branches swaying gently in the evening light. She felt a sense of calm. The heaviness that had clung to her for so long began to lift like clouds breaking after a storm. She thought back to her years with Robert, the simple moments they had shared, raising Stephen and cherishing the little joys of life. Beside her, Jack sat in silence, watching over her with a quiet protectiveness. He knew that this trip had brought Mary some peace, though he understood she still had a long journey ahead. "Mary," he said softly, "would you like me to visit sometimes, just so you never feel alone?" Mary turned to him, eyes glistening with emotion and gratitude. "You're so kind, Jack. Thank you for listening and for being here. I never thought I'd have someone by my side in these last years." Jack smiled, his gaze full of compassion. He realized that sometimes a caring presence and an open heart could soothe even the most profound loneliness. "Mary, you're never alone. Many people care about you, and I'm one of them." As they arrived at the care home, Mary took in the welcoming sight. A place with a small garden, winding paths, and benches nestled under trees, reminiscent of the garden where she and Robert had spent so many evenings. The calm scene reassured her, and she felt she could find a sense of tranquility here. The caregivers helped Mary out of the car and led her inside, Jack walking by her side to see her settled in. Her room was on the first floor, with a large window overlooking the garden. The caregivers introduced her to the many activities available, from social gatherings to group therapy sessions. Mary sensed their warmth and care, which brought her a quiet comfort, as if she had indeed found a final resting place. "Mary, this place isn't like you might imagine," Jack reassured her. "There are so many people here, and you'll soon feel like part of a community. Sharing your story can bring you peace too." Mary nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She knew she had much to learn, about releasing the past and embracing the present. She promised herself that she would no longer live solely in memories, but would try to enjoy every remaining moment. The stories of others here would remind her that she was not alone in facing loss. As Jack and Grace said goodbye, Jack felt a lightness in his heart, knowing Mary had begun a new journey. He gently held her hand, promising to visit often, bringing a bit of the outside world with him. Mary watched them go, warmth and gratitude filling her heart. She stepped into her room, taking in the unfamiliar yet inviting surroundings. Robert's image appeared in her mind, but this time it wasn't a haunting memory but a cherished one. She smiled softly, whispering as if he were beside her, "Robert, I'll be okay. Don't worry." Mary was ready to embrace this new chapter. Though she might lack the familiar faces of her family, she would find comfort in the caring individuals around her. She stepped out onto the balcony, taking a deep breath of the evening air, letting herself feel grounded and renewed. At that moment, she understood that, though life had been full of ups and downs, hope had a way of healing even the deepest scars. Gazing at the fading horizon, Mary whispered her gratitude. She thanked those who had come and gone from her life. She thanked Jack for his kindness, and she thanked herself for holding on. She knew her journey was far from over, but now she could face it with a peaceful heart. On the drive back from the care home after settling Mary into her new residence, Jack and Grace sat quietly in the car, both lost in thought, reflecting on everything they had just experienced and feeling a profound change within themselves. Grace gently squeezed Jack's hand, her heart filled with emotion. "Jack, even though things didn't go as we'd planned, I'm genuinely grateful we were there for Mary. The love she has for her family, despite all the loss and pain she's endured, makes me realize how strong love and sacrifice can truly be." Jack nodded, his eyes soft with empathy. "I feel the same, Grace. Seeing Mary face so much suffering made me realize how lucky we are to have each other, to still have the chance to share life's moments, whether they're tough or joyful." They sat in silence, holding hands tightly, understanding each other deeply in that quiet moment. Jack looked into Grace's eyes, his voice filled with emotion. "Grace, thank you for always standing by my side. You're the reason I want to be a better person every day. I promise I'll always be here for you, just like we've faced these challenges together." Grace smiled, squeezing his hand a little tighter. "Jack, we have each other, and that's what matters most. No matter how tough life gets, I believe love and compassion will help us get through anything." Jack nodded softly. Today had become a special memory for them, marked by the lessons and heartfelt emotions they had shared. Together, they had witnessed Mary's tragedy, but they had also seen the power of compassion, patience, and genuine love. "Grace, no matter what challenges come our way, I believe we can get through them as long as we're together," Jack said, his voice gentle yet resolute. Grace looked at him, her heart full of love and gratitude. "I believe that too, Jack, and I can't imagine my life without you by my side." When they arrived home, they sat together on the sofa, sharing a simple glass of wine. They remained quietly close, savoring the peace they found in that moment. Life would surely bring more challenges, but Jack and Grace knew they had emerged stronger, and their love for each other had deepened beyond words. As they embraced in the calm of the night, Jack whispered, "Grace, thank you for everything." And in that moment, they knew they had discovered something more valuable than any memory, a true understanding of love and kindness in life. Thanks to Officer Carter's awareness and sense of duty, the elderly woman was rescued in time, and a dark truth was brought to light. What do you think about Officer Carter's decision not to ignore the old woman's situation? Share your thoughts below. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.